all the people in the sports media that are whining about the college football rankings, it just drives me absolutely insane. I'm so tired of everyone complaining about, well, this team shouldn't get in and this team should get in and all of the arguments and all that stuff. So for a quick recap, it started out this going into this weekend. We had Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2, TCU at 3, USC at 4, Ohio State at 5, Alabama 6. Okay, USC gets basically run out of the building against Utah. They took a 14-point lead, and then once Caleb Williams got hurt, that basically ended their shot there. And but I was really impressed with Utah. They stuck to their guns and basically physically dominated them. And I think they started counting. I think USC had 30 missed tackles in the game. I mean, it was horrible defense.
Yeah.
I mean, I was saying to our father, before the game, he asked me, who do I think is going to win? I said, I don't know. USC's defense is so bad, like anything could happen in this game.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened, And then the TCU Kansas State game, fantastic game. It's TCU's whole season in a microcosm. You know what I mean? They're playing okay. They fall behind. They make a bunch of mistakes. They find a way to come back. They're right there at the end to win it. And this one, they managed to lose it in overtime because they couldn't get the ball over the goal line twice when they had it at the 1. And so Kansas State got a field goal in overtime to beat them, which honestly, it didn't. Honestly, I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't think any of those games. That was the only thing that kind of sucked about only having a 4-team playoff in the situation we were in yesterday is that none of those games mattered. Like, it was just kind of what order are the teams going to be in, and that's the only thing that matters. So Georgia ran out with the game against LSU. They did get a lot of points and yards thrown on them, but Georgia was, they were in control. They were up 35-10 at halftime, and kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit. Michigan did what they always do. They played around with the team for a half, got into the third quarter, and then kind of took it over. And, most interesting game, but, surprisingly, was Clemson finally switching quarterbacks and just absolutely destroying North Carolina yesterday. Which, it just
makes you just go, dude, what were you guys doing the past 2 years?
Yeah. Well, they didn't have Cade Klubnik last year.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
But it's just once they lost the Notre Dame game, to me that was like easy. It was easy. Just switch to Klubnik, and if they'd have done it, by the way, they'd probably be in the playoff today.
Right.
Like they probably, if they beat South Carolina, they probably are in. Because at least they would have won their conference.
Right.
So that's where we stood. So today the rankings finally came out, and we've got Georgia 1, Michigan 2, TCU 3, still holding at 3, and then they moved Ohio State up to 4. Now look, we've been saying this for a while now. Look, the committee gets it right every single year. This is the 9th year in a row. The committee has gotten the top 4 right. Even when I've had complaints about it, okay? I didn't like the first year when they moved TCU out of it, but they were right. Ohio State went and won the national championship. TCU was not going to do that in 2014, by the way.
Yeah. In fact, I was looking, I pulled up and I was looking through the Final Four every year. And the only year where I really the TCU Baylor thing, what happened that year? Was it a split conference? Because they didn't have a conference championship game. Was it a split
They didn't have a conference championship game, so they had the same number of – they both had one loss. TCU lost to Baylor. TCU was way ahead in the first half. Baylor made a furious comeback and managed to win the game. They had TCU ahead of Baylor the entire season, which made everybody mad because, they beat them. They shouldn't be ahead of them, even though when you watch the breadth of the season – I thought TCU was a better team, and they were really the better team in that game.
Right.
And then Ohio State beat Wisconsin 59-0 in their conference championship game. So they put Ohio State in at 4. which bothered me at the time because I thought it was completely unfair. Ohio State had gotten blown out by Purdue earlier in the season. I just thought it was completely unfair or not Purdue, I think it was Virginia Tech. And it really upset me that they did that. But Ohio State went on, beat Alabama, beat Oregon, and won the whole thing. So there wasn't really it's like it was hard to make an argument against it. So yeah, the committee gets it right every single year, guys. I don't like the attitude that everybody has. Like Danny Cannell continues to call the committee a joke every week. This is a joke. It's like, dude, it's not a joke, man. You continuing to say that is a joke. So
yeah, well, let me read through because I got this pulled up. I'll read through the final four every year. So for every year of the playoffs. So for the 2014 season, so you had Bama 12-1, Oregon 12-1, Florida State 13-0, Ohio State 12-1, and then obviously Baylor and TCU were left out. We were just discussing that. So that's the only year where I was kind of like, And Ohio State did end up winning, so, I mean, I guess it worked out. Then the second year, 2015, Clemson was 13-0, Bama was 12-1, Michigan State was 12-1, and Oklahoma was 11-1. That year was pretty clear. I mean, those teams, they all won their conferences. Stanford was on the outside looking in. They were 11-2. So that year, they got it right. The next year, Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington. And I guess Ohio State didn't win the conference that year, but they had one fewer loss than Penn State. So I guess they got in. Let's see, 2017, Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Bama. Some people, I think, at the time were upset that they put two SEC teams in, but Bama was really good that year, obviously. Let's see, 2018, Bama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Oklahoma. I can understand some people having a problem with Notre Dame, especially given the fact that they get into the playoff and then they get crushed. But, they were 12-0. And then let's see, 2019 was the LSU year. LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma. And LSU just kicked the crap out of everybody. And then let's see, 2020 was the COVID year, which is kind of weird. You had Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame. And then let's see, last year, Bama, Michigan, Georgia, Cincinnati. And then, of course, this year, which we were just discussing. I mean, I was looking through that, and I'm like, there's different things where you could sort of split hairs on stuff, and you could sort of say, well, I think this team should have been in. And it's like, you may have an argument there, but I've got a pretty good argument on the other side. And this thing is a completely subjective ranking. So at the end of the day, I think they get it right every year. Like, you can only pick four teams, and really every year there's only like two, maybe three teams that can win the national championship. This year, it may only be like two.
Right.
I mean, like TCU's not, and Ohio State has been you've been saying they're a fraud all year long, and they seem to be kind of a fraud against Michigan. So, but what you're saying about, that's what we were texting about earlier today. Like, they get it right every year. And a lot of the people that are complaining, they just complain to complain. I mean, literally, it's the same people that complain every year. They were complaining about the BCS system too. I mean, it's literally the same thing every year, and they're never open to any other arguments. They just basically pick and choose a few things, and then they go, well, it should have been this way because of this. And it's like, well, what about all this other stuff? They don't consider that. They just pick and choose a few details, and they go, well, they should have done it this way because of this. And
yeah, so I think Reese Davis on ESPN, I think, did a really good job today of kind of, pointing out all the hypocrisies and things that everybody's saying, right? So the complaints about the committee are, well, what's the criteria? And how do we know how much each criteria is weighted? And how is, whatever? And it's like, you guys, everybody complained about the BCS, right? You guys didn't like the formula. They kept changing the formula. They kept modifying it to try to make it better for everybody. You didn't like it, right? So we got rid of it. And now you guys all want it back. You want a formula again. It's like, so wait a minute. Like, why do we have the committee then? If all you guys want is a formula, then why do we have the committee? Like, I'm just confused. And the arguments that people make, like, well, they're not football people. These are athletic directors who probably coached football at some point. Like, they're not idiots, and they pointed this out. Reese Davis said this too. They act like these people don't watch the games. They don't know what they're talking about. These people all watch the games. They
Some
all
of the people complaining don't watch the games. I know
Exactly
Danny
right.
Cannell probably watches all the games, but some of these writers, they don't watch all the games. You know, they just basically they always root for the underdog. So it's the same people that were whining last year about Cincinnati's not going to get in, and they ended up getting in. You know, so
Yeah. Yeah, and it was the same thing this year about TCU. Like until TCU got into the top 4, well, you're not respecting them. They're not getting enough respect. Blah 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 blah. And it was just like I read this one article. I think it was on ESPN.com where they were like, you know, we want TCU in because do you really want teams who just blow everyone out? Is that what you want? We want a team that plays close games. And it's just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like this isn't like, you know, this isn't like, oh, just pick out your own team. This isn't a deli. This isn't just give me a little bit of this and I would like this and I would like this. This isn't a playground. Like, guys, this is legit.
Yeah. And the other thing is that I think that the committee actually does a really good job of balancing who the best teams are, and then they also factor in most deserving. So, for instance, last year, I didn't really think Cincinnati was one of the 4 best teams in the country, but you looked at the other choices. Like I'm looking at this table. I'm on Wikipedia, so they're showing the different things. So from last year, you had Baylor at 11-2, Utah at 10-3, and Pittsburgh at 11-2. Cincinnati was undefeated. So, and I think Notre Dame was 11-1. So, if you looked at the other options, Cincinnati was undefeated. They won their conference. It's like, okay, you know, based on they're kind of most deserving. These other teams, while maybe you could argue they're better, and maybe you've watched them and you think they're better, they sort of screwed up. They stumbled a few times during the year, and we're not going to award them a spot in the playoff over this team that went undefeated and kind of left no doubt that they were, you know, they had a really good year, you know. So it just, I think if you look at every year, I think they've really done a good job of balancing that out, and also just kind of, I really do think they're trying to find the 4 best teams. Although it doesn't, some years it doesn't work out that way. You know, like this year it didn't really work out that way outside of Georgia and Michigan, right? The other teams you're kind of looking at TCU like, okay, they keep winning, but God, this is really shaky. They're playing with fire like every week. You know, they're getting down by all these huge margins, and they're managing to come back. So, and now I find it kind of funny that, I mean, it's kind of weird, but people are complaining about Ohio State. They're like, well, why should they get in? They just got, you know, absolutely annihilated in that game against
Michigan.
Michigan, and it's like, okay, fine. So wait a minute. So, but at the same time, you're saying, I don't care if TCU loses. You're now saying, well, Ohio State lost, so they should be out. So, like, what? It's just there's a lot of hypocrisy, and a lot of it. It's just a cottage industry of complaining that's not really based on necessarily facts or sound arguments. It's just we're complaining to complain because we want to just keep complaining. And once they move to a 12-team playoff, you know, they're going to complain about the 13th and 14th best team, and they're going to complain about how the different rankings shake out. So it's just, you know, it is what it is. It's going to keep happening with college football.
Yeah. So I mean, look, here's the thing that bothers me. Okay, this is the thing that bothers me the most right now as we're talking about this. Right, everybody's like, Alabama has no chance. They can't be in because they have 2 losses. And it's like, okay, so let me see if I understand this. Right. You guys don't like Ohio State backing into the playoff, right? The people aren't happy that this happened because they lost that game. You don't like them getting in. Oh, but Alabama has 2 losses, so we can't let them in at all. So let me just understand this. Alabama's strength of schedule is significantly better. Alabama and Tennessee's strength of schedule is significantly better than the top 4 teams that got in. Okay? So we're killing Ohio State, you know, because, they got blown out by Michigan. Meanwhile, Alabama, we're like, but their wins aren't good enough. You know, it's like, yeah, but look at the schedule Alabama played, right? They played Texas, they played Mississippi State, they played Ole Miss, they played Tennessee, they played LSU. Like, what bothers me is that Ohio State gets to basically go, yeah, all right, we'll play this kind of average game against Notre Dame, and we'll beat Penn State, who everybody thinks is good because Penn State has beaten all these Big Ten teams, right? And so Ohio State will get in when they really didn't play any tough games. They weren't really challenged by anybody, you know, because none of the teams in their conference are very good. But Alabama plays these 5 really tough games. They win some, they lose some. right? Yeah, they had these tough battles. Everybody's like, oh yeah, but they really struggled with Texas and whatever. It's like, yeah, did you watch TCU play Texas? It wasn't like TCU was, significantly better than them. So it just bothers me, the imbalance of schedule where and then we go, oh well, they lost twice, acting like Alabama's
and that's
not
why
really good.
This is the challenge it's a challenge for the committee to rank 4 teams. That's why I'm saying I feel like they do a really good job considering the talent imbalance and the imbalance in the scheduling between the conferences and trying to pick who's the best teams are and who are the most deserving based on the year that they had. So and by the way, people complaining about that, Alabama didn't get in.
Right.
So, and by the way, I can understand that argument that Alabama, you could say Alabama's better than Ohio State. I kind of think they are. But, they had the 2 losses, and so they Ohio State's a little bit more deserving, even though we could argue about the scheduling imbalance and whatever else.
Yeah, no, I listen, I think they got it exactly right. I think Ohio State should be in. I'm not saying, I'm not one of these people going Alabama should be in. I just think it's just kind of ridiculous the way that this is talked about. As if Alabama lost 2 times, so they're just not. It's just like, really? Like that's how blatant, that's how just blunt we're going to be about this. Like we're not going to evaluate. Oh, there's no nuance,
and it's totally inconsistent too. Because say Cincinnati was 12-1 last year, like they won the conference, but they lost at some point during the year. Everyone was like, oh, they should still get in. Like, yeah, but they have 1 loss, and then it's like, it just. It just devolves into it. So I just thought I had texted you this morning. I thought it was good for us to talk about this because it's like the 14 playoff is done after next season. So it's kind of a good point to just talk about like, hey, you know what? They actually did a really good job. Yeah. They've done a really good job over the 9-10 years of this playoff.
Absolutely. So all right. So I want to ask you one question. I want to talk about something, and then I will preview the playoff games. So are you happy that there's a 12? Do you like that there's going to be a 12-team playoff? And do you think it does a better job at us getting the champion right?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how they're going to be ranking teams. Is it just going to be top? I don't understand it because they're saying what was it? 4, they're saying 6.
Okay, so what I'm seeing, I'm a little confused too. But what I have seen so far is they're going to take the top 4 conference champions, the 4 highest ranked conference champions, and they are going to get a bye in the first round. And then everybody else, they seem to keep in, the rest of the 12, 5 through 12. They seem to keep in that order. What I'm confused about, I thought it makes sense to me that it would be the top 6 teams would be the conference champions, and they would all get home games. Right, the top 4 would have a bye, right? But the other 5 through 12 teams, they're going to get the higher seeds will get a home game. So I thought it would just be the top 6 conference champions ranked. But so what I've seen and what they're doing so far is they're taking the top 4 conference champions and then ranking everybody else after that, 5 through 12, in the order that they're in. They put because Tulane was the 6th best conference champion, so the one team outside the Power 5 that won their conference, they were 12. So, but I don't know how that's going to work going forward. They don't have that worked out yet. But
I don't understand how they're going to be doing rankings every week. I'm confused. So it's hard for me.
What do you mean? They're going to do rankings every week just like they do now. They're just going to do 1 through 12 straight up. They're not going to worry about, because they don't have, but the final rankings, right, it'll be the top 4 teams will be the best 4 conference champions. So this year, the only difference would be, you'd have, Georgia and Michigan, obviously they won their conference. And then it would be like Clemson would be 3. And then Utah would be 4th. Or Clemson would be 3. And either Utah, I think it's Kansas State. Kansas State would be 4th. And then Utah would be, the 5th conference champion. And then Tulane. So it's just going to be a little bit weird because if some team like Kansas State wins the conference championship games now are going to be gigantic.
Yeah.
But anyway, but I didn't let you answer my question, but go ahead.
So, well, see, that's why I was asking about that, because that's confusing because, right now they, when they start doing the playoff rankings in the middle of the year, everything builds up week after week after week till the final ranking, right?
Right.
And the final ranking has obviously a very strong connection to all the previous rankings because, a lot of times it's pretty close to what it was. Like last week, Michigan and Georgia were in the same spots,
Right.
Was TCU in the same? Was TCU 3
no.
or 4 last?
No, last year.
Last week. I'm sorry.
Oh, last week. Yeah, last week the top 3 were the same. The only difference is Ohio State replaced USC.
Well, see, my point is everything's building toward that. But if we're going to do some weird thing where they're going to do the rankings like they've been doing them every week, but then the final one is we're going to take the 4 highest ranked conference champions, which may not be 1 through 4.
They're still going to rank. No. The committee will still rank the teams 1 through 12 like they normally would. Where they play and all of that, that's a separate issue.
Oh,
they're still going to rank them 1 through 12, but where they go and what games they play in, that's going to be different because it's not going to be all 12 of the teams that they ranked because one team will be from a group of 5 conference, right? So they probably won't be. They're not usually. Sometimes they are in the top 12, right? Cincinnati was last year, but a lot of times they aren't. So,
right. Yeah. Look, I think the 4-team playoff is perfect, and I've said that many times before. And but I don't want to go off on a tangent about I think they should just leave it alone. Even though I think that's what they should do ideally. But we don't live in an ideal world, so they're not going to do that. I basically knew once they did 4 teams, they're going to keep expanding it. So I've been really happy with the 4 teams and the 12 team. I'm not saying it's going to be bad. Okay, I think we're going to get we're going to get more games. They're going to be good games. We're going to get matchups that we're not used to seeing from teams in different parts of the country playing each other, which I think is all good. But I just think there's something's going to be lost, obviously. Because it's just when you're letting more people in, it's not as exclusive. So every game, especially toward the end of the year, doesn't matter as much. It's not that they don't matter at all. This year, was it last week or the week before? I was watching, last week. I was watching Florida play Florida State. That had no playoff implications whatsoever. Packed stadium, everybody was into it. Really exciting game, really fun to watch. That's still going to be like Michigan and Ohio State. It's not going to not mean anything anymore. Like it's still going to be a really big deal, but it may not carry as much import as it has the past 9 years because there's so few spots to get in. So it just kind of there's pros and cons with everything. I think the good is going to be really good. The bad of it is it just is what it is, and we kind of got to deal with it. I just, we've talked about this before. I'm just annoyed with the whole, you got to guarantee a spot for the conference champions. Do you? Because sometimes, like I said, it's like Kansas State won. You have to put them in now? Kansas State has 4 losses. Right?
Yeah, I think, I'm with you. Look, I think the 4 teams is fine. I think it's just fine the way it is. But I realize because of money, that's, different. I don't, right. It's confusing to me why college football has taken this long to catch on to, let's have more games. We can make more money.
Yeah.
Hello?
Right.
Have you been watching anything that's been going on in sports for how long? But I heard Dan Wetzel had an interesting comparison. He's like, could you imagine if the NFL sold the AFC championship game to the tourism board of San Antonio and they got half the money?
Yeah.
And they had to put it on at a certain time on a certain day. No one would do this. It makes absolutely no sense. But
yeah,
the people in charge of these bowls still have power, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
I think I like the 12-team playoff. I like this structure because, listen, are we letting some teams in that probably shouldn't be in? Sure. But when you're letting 12 teams in, it's it's fine. Like Ryan Russillo is, I don't like guaranteeing a spot to a group of 5, somebody that's outside the Power 5. I think that's ridiculous. It's yeah, I get it, but they're going to get destroyed in the first game anyway. It doesn't really, it doesn't seriously damage the who wins the championship. And so that's kind of my thing on the 12 team.
I think my main point that I was I guess I didn't state this as perfectly earlier, but I guess the main point I'm trying to make is the selection show at the end of the season after the Sunday after the conference championships becomes like the NCAA men's basketball tournament selection show, right? Where it's not, it's almost a little bit divorced from the previous rankings you've been doing, which I kind of don't like because, like I said, it builds every week and it creates drama and it creates interest and it pisses some people off. It creates arguments, and that's part of what's made college football so interesting and so much different from all the other sports. So,
yeah, but the arguments aren't going to go away.
No, they're not. They'll still be, like I said, there's pros and cons. It'll still be really good. There's some things that'll get lost, but we'll kind of move forward.
Because now people are going to fight for like cats and dogs for those 6 at-large spots. And it's going to be, but, we're going to be debating, Ole Miss coming close to beating Alabama versus, it's going to get kind of ridiculous. But listen, I'm here for it. I think it's good. I want more games in college football. It's a great sport. I love the fact that we get we're going to get an extra weekend of it. We're going to get matchups that we don't normally see. The fact that the four teams on a bye kind of helps protect us from not having as many blowouts. It does kind of, so I feel like it served its purpose. I feel like 12 is going to go to 16 real fast. Yeah. Because if we're going to give teams games on campus and you're excluding the top 4 teams from those games, I'm pretty sure that's going to be an incentive to try to get that changed. But yeah, I don't think it has any bearing on who wins the championship. I don't think this makes it easier for anybody. I just think, it's kind of like we're patting teams. It's kind of like you said, Clark, it's like the basketball tournament. We're going to pat 4 or 5 teams on the head and go, oh yeah, we'll let you in. Yeah, you're good enough. When they're not.
No, you're not.
They're not. Like, I like Cincinnati. They weren't good enough to be in the top 4. I like TCU. They're not really good. But this year, it's like you said, who are you going to put in? Tell me. Who is it? Who are you going to put in? Because there aren't that many. We're having this is the funniest part, is that we're having a hard time getting to 4 candidates. And we're going to put 12 in. So go figure. Anyway,
we'll just, for example, let's put it like this year, if we were to have a 12-team playoff. Let's see. Clemson won their conference, right?
Yep.
So so Georgia and Michigan, they're the 2 highest. They would be like the 2 highest ranked ones, right?
Yep.
Then I guess Clemson, and then Utah and Kansas State.
Well, yeah, Utah and Kansas State would be 3 and 4.
Oh, see that? That's where it's just like, oh God, really? Like it just kind of.
Yeah, if we have upsets, that's the thing. If we have upsets in conference championship games, it kind of takes away a spot because TCU's getting an at-large spot. USC's getting an at-large spot.
Well, but hopefully what ends up happening is, and I think you've talked about this before, hopefully what ends up happening is if winning your conference carries that much significance, the losses you have outside of conference don't matter in terms of conference play, in terms of getting into the conference championship game. So I would hope that teams would be like, oh, let's schedule some out-of-conference stuff. Just because people will watch. Like, they'll get insane. Like, if you can get teams from different, like a team from the SEC playing a team from the Big Ten, or a Big 12 team playing a Big Ten team, or, different things like that. And especially teams from different regions of the country playing each other, whether it's a neutral site or an on-campus game or what. Like, we need more of that. So hopefully that is sort of a side effect of moving to 12 teams. So we'll see.
I mean, listen, the pitfalls are, we've talked about this. One of the real pitfalls is this: the SEC might just wipe the floor with everybody. That kind of worries me. Everybody's going to be mad if the last 4 teams for the semifinals are all SEC teams. It's gonna really upset people. But I don't know what to tell you. So let's preview the game. So we've got New Year's Eve, which I don't know how college football has not learned what the hell is going on with television at this point. I don't get it. All the money comes from television. Why are you putting your biggest games on New Year's Eve? Like, I know it's a Saturday this year. I get it. But are you smoking crack? What's wrong with you? So TCU is playing Michigan in the
Well, but wait a minute. January 1st, they don't want to go up against the NFL.
No, I'm not saying put them on the first. I'm just saying put them on a day when everybody's going to watch. I just, that's all. Put them on Friday. Put them on, I don't care what day, but you can't put them on New Year's Eve.
I think people are, I think, that federally they're observing the New Year's Day on the 2nd because the 2nd is a Monday.
Right.
So you're saying maybe put it on a Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
The championship game is on a Monday.
Well, but I mean, they lucked out this year because it isn't on Saturday. The New Year's Eve is a Saturday, so.
Yeah, but I still don't think you're going to get the audience that you want. But regardless, anyway, so TCU's playing Michigan at 4 o'clock in the Fiesta Bowl out in Arizona. And then at 8 o'clock, Ohio State's playing Georgia. Early line, Georgia is favored by Ohio State over 6.5. And Michigan is favored over TCU by 9.5. So what do you think what's your early lean on those games?
Is Blake Corum going to be coming back for Michigan?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I mean, well, again, if they can, because I'm trying to think of, remember the game last night with Kansas State and TCU. I mean, Deuce Vaughn was kind of running all over the place. So, I mean, Michigan's got other running backs, can't they? I mean, if they can, be good on the line of scrimmage, then I would think they could run the ball because I don't think they're going to get away with having J.J. McCarthy throwing a bunch, again. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for TCU to win this game, they've got to throw the ball early and they got to score early. They have the receivers to do it. One of their best receiver, Johnston or whatever, that guy is a stud. So I think for TCU has got to get the lead and get the game somewhat in their control. They cannot fall behind by double digits against Michigan because they'll never get the ball enough to catch up. And I just think Michigan is the more physically dominant team. They'll figure out how to run the ball at some point during the game, which is what they're going to do. And if they're winning both lines of scrimmage, it's just going to be really hard for TCU. They're going to have to make big plays throwing the ball because I don't think they're going to be able to sustain drives down the field against Michigan's defense. So I think this one, this one could look a lot like a lot of Michigan's games. Close at halftime, and then they run away with it in the second half.
Right. Yeah, Blake Corum is expected to miss the rest of the season because he had surgery.
Yep.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much the rest of the year. We'll see. I mean, it's a few weeks away, so I don't know what kind of surgery he had. If he just had cartilage removed or something, I don't know. So,
yeah. Georgia, Ohio State. I mean, look, I think honestly, I think for Ohio State, they need to get their guys on offense back healthy. They need to get Jackson Smith and Jigba. They need to get Travion Henderson, the running back. They need to have all of their offensive weapons to have a chance in this game. You've seen that Georgia can be thrown. You can get yards. You can throw the ball on them a little bit. You can see that from the way they've played this year. The problem is I just don't think Ohio State's defense can stop anybody. I don't think they're going to be able to slow down Georgia, and Georgia just has – they got tight ends going crazy. They got running backs. And if you watch that game against LSU, as soon as Georgia felt threatened, they absolutely destroyed them on offense. 35 points in the first half. So that's what worries me about that game. It's funny. I think TCU has a better chance of hanging in there against Michigan than Ohio State hanging in there against Georgia.
Yeah, I was just thinking of this, probably the national championship game matchup that probably college football wants is probably Ohio State, Michigan. Because you've never really had that where they're literally playing for the national championship. And those are two of the biggest brands in sports, really, Ohio State and Michigan. So I don't really think it's going to happen, though. I don't think both those teams can win the game. I don't think Michigan might win, but then Ohio State will probably lose. I mean, I just don't think. I mean, Ohio State's got to prove that they can. If someone pushes them around, they got to prove that they can kind of push back, and I don't really see it. They haven't really shown anything.
What I will say is the thing they have going in their favor is everyone's going to say Ohio State's no good for the next month.
True.
Everybody's going to be telling them that they don't deserve to be in the playoff. They have no chance. And, Georgia's going to stomp them and all of this stuff. So that could lead to a very interesting game. The game is in Atlanta, by the way.
Right.
So
which is like a home game for Georgia.
Right. It's going to be tough that's a pretty tough spot to be in. Even though I think Ohio State could come out early and play inspired, I just don't see it. I think this is a pretty clear Georgia-Michigan final, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. Some of the rest of the games, it's kind of funny. Like, it's amazing how far bowl games have fallen off, because I think most of these bowl games, most of the good players, especially if they're going to the NFL, are probably not going to play.
Yeah.
So they were talking about that earlier on the preview show, like Alabama, Kansas State, like they don't even have a line for the game yet because they don't think anybody on Alabama's team is going to play. They think they're all
Right.
going to take it off. And, USC is playing Tulane. USC is only favored by 1.5 because I think Caleb Williams has the hamstring. I don't think they think he's going to play. He's not going to the NFL, but they don't think he's going to play. And if that's the case, then
Yeah, forget it.
how do you pick that game? So, look, I'll just give you, the matchups that intrigued me. I was kind of intrigued by Penn State against Utah in the Rose Bowl. I always think that's kind of an interesting game. They tend to get some relatively good teams in there. I would like to see Kansas State play Alabama, but I don't know that we're really going to.
If they were actually playing, yeah, I think that would be interesting.
Right. Tennessee Clemson is playing in the Orange Bowl. Obviously Tennessee's going to have their backup quarterback, so that kind of. But I do think that's an interesting game just to see what happens. Tennessee is obviously not what they were, but they do get 4 weeks to kind of get ready.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. And I'm sure Clemson will be playing Cade Klubnik at quarterback, so we'll see how that goes. I don't know. Texas is playing Washington. I think that's kind of cool just to watch both quarterbacks. I think that there's a little bit of star power in that game. Oregon's playing North Carolina in the Holiday Bowl. Both those teams like to score and don't really like to stop anybody, so that might be an entertaining game. But honestly, it's really kind of confusing as to why we do this with all these bowl games when it's just not the same anymore. Nick Saban was saying on TV last night, he's like, well, we've kind of decided that the bowl games aren't really that important, so we might as well just expand the playoff.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think he's got a good point, because at least if you're in the top 12, right, your guys will probably show up to play.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a good thing. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, my overall take hasn't changed. I think Georgia's the best team all around, and I think they're going to make it really difficult for whoever they have to play.
Right.
And I don't know that, there's no great team this year. I think Georgia's about as close as it's going to get. And I just think Georgia's just kind of on a mission, and it'd be really fascinating to see if they can win back-to-back, because surprisingly enough, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, no.
Like Alabama did it in 2011, 2012. USC did it in like 03, 04. Nebraska did it in 94, 95. About once a decade it happens. It's not something that happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I just think, especially if Georgia wins, Stetson Bennett, he walked on.
Yep.
Right. And he was when he was a kid, he wanted to play at Georgia. And then he walks on and he wins and he could win two. That's crazy.
Well, it's even longer now. He walked on, then he had to go to a junior college, played there, came back. It's a crazy story. And then he wasn't supposed to be the quarterback last year. And then JT Daniels gets hurt. And then it's insane.
Yeah.
It's a crazy story.
That's a sports movie right there. That's,
Yeah. It would be incredible for him, and he's 25 years old, so it just goes to show, which, everybody in college now is 25, because, everybody, it's funny, everybody got that red shirt year, and then the COVID year, they basically said you can just have an extra year of eligibility if you want. So it's insane. So anyway, yeah, looking forward to it. I'm sad that the college football season is kind of over. This is kind of a dead.
But it was a good season. We had some really
period,
good. I mean,
it was a lot
the
of fun.
Bama games where they lost to LSU and Tennessee, and then some of the Big 12 stuff and some of the Pac-12 stuff. I mean, yeah, some really good games.
Yep. All right. So before we get